Welcome to another week of The Animal Black Woman. I am your host, Donna, and we have another great interview for you. If this is your first time here, welcome. This will be one of many amazing interviews that I have, but this week, this interview was really great. I spoke with an old friend from when I was in LA, and it was a really eye-opening interview that actually gave me some clarity on some things in my life. I always learn something from these women, but every time it's still a surprise. So let's just jump into it. What is your name?
My name is Shayla Monique, or Shayla Hosley, but I do go by Shayla Monique.
So where are you from?
I was born and raised in Thousand Oaks, California, which is like maybe 2% Black, very like affluent, retired white people type of area. So I graduated in a class of 500 plus, and there were 6 Black students in my graduating class. So that just kind of tells you a little bit about how I grew up, being like the little speck of pepper in my classrooms and everything. My mom was born on the East Coast. My dad's from Compton, and they met in college and created this masterpiece that you see here. So I always tell people that I'm bougie, but don't let the Thousand Oaks fool you. I can get Compton if I need to. No, but I think I was actually talking to a client of mine. I think it's given me the opportunity to be comfortable on like both sides of the spectrum. You know, I can be the only Black person in a room, and be comfortable there. And I can be sitting on the curb or on a corner with a bunch of dudes drinking Old E and be having a conversation and be comfortable there also. So, you know, in the vein of code switching, I think I got all the languages in between there as well in my tool belt. So, yeah.
What do you think was the biggest kind of effect growing up in an environment where you were the only Peppa going through? What do you think is the biggest effect that had on you as like an adult and as like the person you became?
I think that it took me longer to appreciate the things that made me different. I think that it's more acceptable now to be wearing your natural hair. It's more acceptable now to not speak so proper all the time. It's more acceptable now because when I was growing up, my mom and my dad weren't together. It was just me and my mom from the time I was 6 until the time I was 17. So I lived in an area where my friends had, you know, both their parents who had, you know, high paying jobs, and some of them had staff that worked in their house. And that was so foreign to me. My mom and I lived in an apartment. And so it was so different. And so I kind of grew up feeling like I was lacking something because I didn't have that experience, or I didn't feel like I fit in. Like, how did I end up here with all these people? And my day-to-day is so different. I remember like wanting to wear my hair straight all the time, or wanting my name to be something like Melissa because Shayla was like so different and nobody else had a name like that. So it really did take me a long time, probably honestly not until I was in my late teens, early 20s, to just be comfortable with me being the way that I am, the way that God made me, how I look, and appreciate it, because I just went through so much time wanting to look like people I was around so that I fit in and made them more comfortable with me. And I realized like I was really trying to make them comfortable. It wasn't me being uncomfortable with it. Was just because they were like, you come to school and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't think that your hair was going to feel like that. It's soft. And I'm like, yeah, I wash it. That's moisturized. Or like, your hair was short yesterday. Now you have long braids. Is that your hair? Like, yes, it's mine. It's in my head. I bought it. But it was so different from what my friends were experiencing. So it really did take me a long time to just be okay with being me.
Okay, so what is something that you learned growing up from your mother that you want to make sure you pass to your daughter? Not even just your mother, like your parents in general, that you want to pass to your daughter. And what is something you learned from your parents that you don't want to pass on to your daughter?
This is a good question, because I do talk to my daughter about this like often. One thing that I think is absolutely necessary that I instill in her now is that when you well, not now because COVID, but when you walk out of the house, you are a representation of us, like your family. And that's not to burden you, but it's to remind you that all of us are like behind you. So it's not only are you presenting yourself to the world, but you're presenting, in essence, our family to the world. And so you should be aware of that when you're out here doing whatever it is that you're doing. And you can either, make us and yourself proud, or you can make us and yourself disappointed, but the choice is yours. But just so that you understand that you're not by yourself in like the things that are instilled in you and the things that you're doing. You have somebody behind you, absolutely, but know that that comes with a responsibility. And then one thing that I absolutely definitely have made sure that I didn't carry on with my daughter, I hated being a kid and feeling like there were all these conversations that were going on around me that concerned me, but I just was not a part of. I hated that. And I do agree that some things are like, age appropriate, so you don't need to be in the conversation. But my mom has always had like a very open door policy with communication. Like I know I could talk to my mom about anything, but there was a time where there were conversations that I knew like they're talking about something that's going to affect my life, but I don't know what the conversation is because, it's not for little ears. So I try to make those kind of conversations age appropriate when I bring her into them, but I don't want her to feel like life is just happening to her and she has no knowledge of what's about to come. Like if we're going to move or if somebody's ill and they may pass, like I don't want it to be a surprise to you. I want you to know what's coming so that you can manage your expectations and your emotions. Because if it comes at you fast and you're not prepared, like that's a lot. And I think people sometimes don't give their kids credit for how resilient they can be, because a lot of times those things do come at them fast because there's no preparation. And sometimes they bounce back, and sometimes that's like a trauma you never recover from. And I didn't want her to have that kind of a trauma if I could stop it from happening.
When was there a time that you like that happened to you and you were like, this has affected me to a point that like it kind of, what was the like moment or the thing that like instilled in you that you don't want that to happen for like your children?
I think the situation that surrounded my mom and my biological father not being together was just like a lot of like unspoken things for me. My dad, he went into the Navy when I was 2. And at that point in time, my parents were not together. And so between the time that I was 2 and the time that I was 7, like I didn't see him at all because he was stationed in Virginia. We live here in California. So I remember being in New Jersey, visiting family one day when I was 7, and I came downstairs and he was in the living room. And I was like, and I knew who he was because, I would talk to him on the phone every now and then. Maybe he would send a letter, but I didn't understand like why he wasn't in my life. I didn't understand why he was in a different state. I knew he was in the military, but it still didn't like, I didn't understand like we were in a relationship. It didn't work. We're not together. Like none of that conversation ever happened. And then, and he would be fine with sharing this, so I don't mind it being kept. But my dad had a drug addiction. And so part of him not being around was because my mom was protecting me from when he was in that space. And I didn't know that. I had no idea. I didn't know that until I was 18. My dad, when he got discharged from the military, he went to rehab. And he was calling me, telling me like, hey, I'm going to rehab. I'm doing this for you. And I was just like, what happened? Like rehab? Like I remember seeing him like, I think I was like 12, maybe 15. And I remember him coming to visit my grandmother. So I went to LA to go visit. And I remember him like drinking a lot, but I'm like, I know a lot of men who drink a lot. So like I didn't think it was a thing. I didn't know that there was a drug addiction that happened. And I think had I known, it probably would have managed my expectations of what he was able to do and what he wasn't able to do differently. Because there were a lot of broken promises that came my way. And because there was no conversation, because it wasn't age appropriate, or they just didn't want to talk to me about it because they didn't know how to handle it. I just kind of always felt like my dad didn't want me, and he didn't want to be around me. And there was something about me that pushed him away. I had no idea there was all this other stuff that was going on that contributed to him being where he was and how he was. And I think that would have been helpful for me and how I felt about him and our relationship and how I felt about myself at that time. So I never wanted to perpetuate that with her.
Wow, that's a really powerful thing you just said. Because I think for parents, it's always trying to figure out how much you tell your kids, you know?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
probably your mom probably thought she was protecting you and protecting him, when
Oh,
in
absolutely.
reality,
I think my mom has always
yeah.
been really good about trying to make sure that she doesn't, like, you know, a lot of people when they break up, especially when they have kids, there's always this like, well, your dad ain't this, and my mom has never done that. So I have to give her credit for always trying to make sure that she didn't speak negatively about my father to me. She always wanted me to be able to make my own decision, my own analysis of the situation. She might say like, he's not here, whatever, he's doing his best, but she never really delved too deep into it. Um, but I think that also, you know, my mom had me at 20. So when you're in your early 20s and you're trying to figure out like life for yourself, also, there's so many things I didn't know in my 20s I thought I knew that I couldn't imagine, because I had my daughter at 22. I couldn't imagine being, you know, 25 with a 5-year-old trying to explain to her about where her dad is. Like that's a lot to figure out. So um I think as we get older, we have hindsight that helps. You know, me having an experience with having a child out of wedlock, and so now my daughter's dad, like, we're not together, he's still around, but even explaining to her like what happened with us, I tried to explain it to her the way that I would have wanted somebody to explain it to me. Because you're right, like the decision of how much do I tell you and how much do you not need to know. I think you kind of really can't know until after you said it, you know? And then you're like, okay, maybe that was too much. And I have to manage that. But sometimes it is helpful because I try to make sure with her that I think was something that never happened to me is I asked her, like, this happened. How do you feel about that?
Mm,
Um, like, are you okay with this? Are you not okay with this? Do you want to talk about how you feel? Again, my mom was always very open with communication, and she always made it known, like, if I wanted to tell her something, I could, but I don't remember her like asking me how I felt about certain things and like reassuring me, like, if this thing feels like it's too hard for you to talk about, you can still talk to me about it. Um, and I think that that's important because mental health struggles are real, you know, and people don't think that kids go through that, but they really do, more so than I think um, adults realize. And I think maybe even now it's kind of more prevalent. You know, we see all these kids who are being bullied and they're committing suicide and all these things that are happening. And so it's like, that was probably happening before, but nobody brought the conversation up, or people didn't think to ask their kids how they were dealing with certain things. So I try to do check-ins with her as often as possible because I don't want to miss a step, you know. I don't want to be like, did I put too much on you? Did I tell you too much? Because I'll ask her, like, I told you this, like, should I not have said it? Did it make you feel away? And for the most part, you know, she's been just like, I'm glad you told me because at least I know, and I'm not wondering, or I'm not coming up with my own conclusion of what's going on. Um, so you know, I'm just trying to, not that my parents, I don't feel like my parents did a bad job or they did something wrong, but I'm just trying to improve on, you know, the foundation that was laid.
everyone does the best, even when it's one thing that when I was in therapy that like kind of blew my mind, like to the point I don't even know if I can restate it, but she said even when people are doing things that are hurtful or damaging, like think of like the worst human being in the world, in their mind, they're doing the best they can. They think it's for like the
Yeah.
greater good, which is
Mm-hmm.
like mind blowing to think that people who are doing things that are damaging somehow in their mind they're thinking it's justified or
Yeah.
it's for a reason. And that's scary to think, but
Mm-hmm.
that's way extreme. Like your parents were basically just doing the best they could with
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And
So, go
somebody
ahead.
said something to me about like, your expectations of your parents, because I think as kids, we expect our parents to be perfect. We just think they know everything. And as you get older, you start to realize like, they're just regular people trying to figure it out just like I am. But some of my friends and people that I know who have parents who are just like, who did things or said things that were just like really hurtful or damaging, or, they thought they were doing their best. Somebody said something about like, sometimes you are a person who requires 80% of somebody, and that's just who you are. And maybe you have a parent who is a 20% person and their best is 20%. And that's not that's nothing wrong. It just, that's what their best is. And so you're requiring 80% and your parent only has 20% to give you, and that's their best. And you can't fault them from doing their best. You just have to be able to figure out where to get that 60% from, that's a healthy place, without looking for it from, some other whatever, or expecting that 20% person to give you 80 when you keep running into that's all they have to give you. And that's crazy to think that, wow, like, yeah, some people are exhausted. Like my grandmother, who is my last remaining grandparent, I think I'm the only grandchild that she hasn't had to help raise. And so I remember being younger and being like, how come she never says like, I love you? How come she's not like a huggy type of person? Cause my mom's mom was very much like that. And my aunt was like, I think she's just burnt out. She's just tired. Like, she's had 9 kids and all these grandkids, and she's had to raise or help raise a lot of them. She's done. And I'm like, now I get it. But at that age, I was like, that's not how grandmothers are supposed to be.
And yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, I think it's very it's weird to see everyone as human. So having a daughter, what has been the greatest gift of having a daughter, and what has been the greatest burden of having a daughter?
I just have been really blessed to see her be happy, joyful, intelligent, beautiful. She's always been great with like conversation. She gives the best hugs. Anybody that you will ever meet tells you that about her. And for me to have created something and to be raising something that is bringing joy is like such a positive thing for me, because I'm like, oh, I haven't messed her up. Like, I brought something positive here, and I do have something to offer another human being. Because if I could raise somebody to be that awesome, like, clearly I'm doing something right. I think what the biggest burden has been, to be very honest, my daughter is the first female in my family that has not been sexually abused. And to be worried about that at all times, like if something happens to her, like I feel like I've always been very concerned about making sure that I break that generational curse, however I can do so. And, by the grace of God, I have done it. But in the process of that, I've been like very concerned, like, do I let her go around certain people? What about sleepovers? They got a dad, they got a brother, they got a sister. Like, you always have to be concerned or cognizant of what's happening to your kids. And so, that probably has been, honestly, that's really the only thing that's burdensome, other than the fact that she eats a lot. But I just have wanted to make sure that I did whatever I could to assure that wasn't going to happen to her. And, a lot of prayer and a lot of like being diligent about making sure that I didn't let her go spend the night with people until I knew she could verbally tell me if she was uncomfortable or if something happened.
That's good.
Or if she didn't like a person. Or if she felt something. She's always been very like intuitive. And so that's probably the biggest thing, because I just never wanted her to have to carry that.
Is it hard for you to talk about that part of your life?
It's not, but only because I think now that well, I should go backwards. So when it happened to me, it was from a female cousin. So being that it was somebody that was in my family, somebody that I trusted, somebody that I looked up to because she was older than me. And at the time, I don't think I really understood exactly what was going on. I just knew that it wasn't okay. I knew something was off about it, because why would this only happen when other people are like not around? Something just didn't feel right. And I didn't tell my mom until like 11 years after. And I probably should have, but I didn't really know. And I think it's very real about like, people who can repress memories. Cause for a long time, I didn't even remember. And I can't remember what it was. I think I really started to like be serious about my walk with God around the time I was 19. And I don't remember what it was that brought that to my memory. And I told my mom, and she was more like, she, I think, had thought that she had stopped it because it happened to her, and it happened to my aunt, it happened to my grandmother. And now, as I understand more about how things happen in your life, it's like there are other young women who have experienced this, that I can help them walk through that period of, not necessarily rehabilitation, but moving past it. How do you work through your emotions? How do you work through, for me, it created a space where I noticed I was kind of standoffish with females, and it wasn't intentional. I have 7 brothers. So I'm always around guys. I'm used to being around guys. I spend a lot of my time around men. And I was just like, why do I feel weird about around like other girls? Like, why do I feel weird about like, don't hug me, don't lay on me? Like, what was that about? And so once I finally started to go through like, trauma responses and things like that, like it all made sense. And so now it's like, I can recognize that in some people, and I can talk to them about what it's like when you're going through it, what it's like when you're trying to process it, what it's like when you get to the other side, to where it's like, yeah, this is a thing that happened to me, but it doesn't run me. It doesn't change the way that I live my life now. I could have let it rule my life, but I don't. But it's not like that for everybody. For some people, that happens, and they never work through it, and they never get to the other side of it. And, it breaks a piece of them it's never fixed. And so I'm just grateful that I didn't stay there in that part of the process, So it's easier for me to talk about now, because now, I do a lot of work with the youth ministry. So I'm always talking about things that happen. And I'm just so used to being in the headspace that like the negative things that happened to me in my life were still meant for a purpose. Whether it's having a child before I felt like I was ready, whether it was, I had 2 abortions after I was pregnant with Talia. And I would have never thought that I would do something like that. I'm a God-fearing woman. I would have told anybody else not to do that. But for me, it was more of I'm struggling to raise this one kid. There's no possible way that I could have another. And then after that, it was like, me and her dad aren't even together anymore. So what is this going to look like? And so dealing with that, and how I felt like that about that, and grieving, doing something I thought I would never do, and moving past that, and making that decision, and the consequences that I felt like would come from that. And then after being like, well, what if I can never have kids now? Like when I want to have kids, because I made that choice. There's so many things that in life, as you get older, you make these choices and decisions, and you're just like, well, I never thought I would do that, or I never thought I would be here, and here I am. And I never look at something that happened, even like, having cars repossessed, not paying bills, whatever it's been. I just have always looked at things where it's like, okay, what can I learn from this? And what can I carry with me to tell the next person, like, this is the cautionary tale of
Here's a tale that you don't want to do.
Right. This is who you don't want to be. This is what you don't want to do. So yeah, it is what it is. Like, I just look at it as a thing that happened. And once I started to talk about it more, it became a thing where, unfortunately, so many other people have experienced it that it's like, dang, there's so many people out here who have gone through something where somebody's just trying to make you ready for something before you are. And, that's unfortunate, but it grows you. It grows you in a way. I think I have a different kind of compassion for other people now also, when I think about why people do the things that they do, and why people make the choices that they make. Either it's for self-preservation or comfort or whatever it is. But a lot of times we talked about, like, when people are just doing their best, a lot of times people aren't trying to hurt you. They're just trying to protect themselves, or they're trying to figure something out within themselves. Even like, cheating. 9 times out of 10, the cheating in a relationship is not about, the other person. It's about something that's going on within the individual who's doing that. So it just kind of gave me different perspective on how people in general interact with others. Because for me, I actually had an opportunity to talk to this woman last year. She reached out to me and had been like, why do we not talk anymore? Like she didn't know, like she didn't remember. And I laid it all out for her. And she was like, I honestly don't remember doing that. But that happened to me when I was a young girl. And so, I'm sorry, because I know what it did to me. And she's like, I'm in therapy and I'm working through some things. And so this just gives me another thing to, work on for myself. So I'm glad that you told me, but I understand why you have chosen to put, space in between us, especially now because you're a mom. And I get it. I don't like it because I do remember, you being one of my favorite people, but I never remembered why we, stopped being around each other. And so for me, I'm just like, yeah, it gives me perspective. Like, that same thing happened to you. So maybe you didn't think it was wrong. Maybe you didn't know it was inappropriate, but here we are as grown women, and it makes you look back at the choices you made differently.
Wow. Okay. So first of all, wow. No, because it just, I mean, listen, this gonna have a trigger warning in it, but
Right.
but because it just reminds, because I've dealt with child on child molestation and like stuff like from someone older, and I for me it's always been something that you said that just like for me it was like, ugh. It was because it's hard for me to want to be touched by people, like by women specifically, and even men. Like there's like a part, and it's because it feels like it's something dirty, or or like sexually tied into it, or like somewhat like just to be in your like body space.
And it's interesting because for me now, as somebody who's preparing to be a wife, I've even had to have conversations with my fiance where I'm telling him like, hey, as far as that part of life is concerned, like, you're gonna have to take it easy with me, because sometimes I may not notice something is a trigger for me, but it's a trigger for me. And so I have to be aware of what those triggers are, and then go back to like why I feel like that, and then remind myself that this is not somebody who's being self-serving in this moment.
That's good.
And that's not always easy, because I know people ask like, well, do you ever like completely get over something like that? Because I do remember being younger and being in relationships and being like, oh, I always felt like if I wasn't having sex with my boyfriend or whoever, like he wasn't gonna like me. So like I have to do this, but I don't really want to be doing this, but I'm gonna, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? That's what you do. And never with any of these men were they forceful or anything like that. It just was like a lack of regard for what I wanted in the situation. It's just like, whatever I want to do, like, you're just here for it. Okay, yeah, sure. And so now to be in a relationship where it's about both of us being comfortable and loving on one another, it's different when you're trying to wrap your mind around that, when you've had interactions that weren't that. You really have to challenge. I always say this, you have to challenge the lie with the truth, because the negative thought, the lie, is going to come up, because that's what you've experienced, that's what you're used to. You have to challenge that with the truth. You're not trying to hurt me, you love me, this isn't about you, this is about us, it's about me. And it's just it's a process, it's a journey, because unlearning, because your body holds memories, not even just like mentally, but your body holds memories. And so like unlearning that and getting rid of those, it takes however long it takes, you know, and the other people around you have to be able to respect that. But if they don't know that it's there, they can't. And that's something that's big.
If you had the attention of the entire world, what would you say?
Love is more important than getting what you want.
Ooh, explain.
And I say that because I watch the news. Like, let's just talk about, I'm going to get political for like a hot second. We watch
Girl,
what's going on.
You can do whatever you want on this.
We watch a lot of what's going on in politics right now in America. What I don't like about it is that it's also feeding into Christianity, right? So there's all these like Christians who are like, this is what God wants. God wants Trump to be the president and we have to do this and blah, blah, and whatever. Obviously not, because that's not what happened. So, but that's an aside. But what comes out of that is people on the pulpit who are saying, if you don't believe that, you know, this presidential candidate or president-elect or whatever is the right person, then like there should be a curse upon you, or you're not really Christian or whatever. But then it's like, okay, now it creates division in the kingdom. So now, as me, as a Black Christian woman, I have people that I know who support that message. So do you look at me away? Am I not your sister in Christ? Is that not, if God is love and we're supposed to move and operate in love, what is more important? Operating in love and treating other people out of that headspace, or getting what you want? That like they don't always line up, because when you lead with love, you're going to make compromises. You're going to do some things that may not be what you would want, but what's best for the other person. You're not always going to get what you want when you're leading with love. And because sometimes what we want is not what we need. Sometimes what you want is not what you need at all, but because you're so dead set on it. Like we talk about in the Bible, like, dying to yourself and aligning your will with God's will. That's because we have free choice, and we can will ourselves and want all kind of stuff till the day is long. But at the end of the day, there have been plenty of times, and I'm sure it's happened with you, where you got something you wanted, and you're like, I didn't need this.
Oh, my last 5 situations.
Right. I feel like I did not need this. Like, why did I want this? Why was I telling myself I wanted this? Even like, you were like, man, I'm craving this meal. And then you get it and you be like, nope, I didn't need that. I didn't need that at all. Or you get sick and you be like, dang, I did not need to be out. Like, none of that. And so sometimes it's really about thinking about what the love response is over what makes you feel comfortable, what makes you feel good, what makes you just, so there's so much self-centeredness that comes from operating in your wants out of operating in love. So I think that as I've gotten older and I understand like the totality of what love means, because it's one of those words that like we all use it, but it takes you, like, you continue to learn about love throughout your life. When I was telling people I loved them when I was, in my first relationship, that wasn't love. I liked you. I thought I loved you. Like, I probably loved you as much as I could at that age, but I wasn't willing to make any sacrifices for you. If you said something I didn't like, we were going to break up. Like, if you don't want, if I had, a dance competition, you didn't come, like, I'm not talking to you and now you're not my boyfriend anymore. Like, that's not what real love looks like. And then if we, look even bigger onto like God's love, how many times do we do things that are in direct opposition of showing God that we love him, and he still is there for us, and he still, makes sure that we wake up and that we have provision and security and all of these things that we need. And he's just waiting for us to just, hey, love me back whenever you're ready. So I think that as I continue to like try to live life like that. And, I'm not gonna lie, you're gonna get your feelings hurt. You're gonna get your little toe stomped on. But when I try to make sure that I'm leading with love as opposed to trying to do whatever I want. And honestly, that started for me with being a parent, because now I have to make sure that I'm taking care of somebody else's needs over what I want. Yeah, maybe I'm in my 20s. I want to go and hang out with my friends, but I need to be here with my baby because she needs her mom.
Shayla was awesome. That interview was great. I felt like it was a really important conversation that we were having. As it was going, I was like, oh, okay. You better let us know. You better and give me some wisdom. So if you love this interview, please rate, comment, share, subscribe. There are other interviews that I've done with just amazing women that always have so much to bring to the table and telling their stories. And it's just fun because their stories are funny, their stories are important, and their stories are life-changing. Black women got something to say. We got something to say. Also, follow Shayla at SHAYLA.MONIQUE. She's a woman of many talents, and she could probably help you get your life together. She can do anything. Other than that, have a good week. Bye, y'all.